What is up, everyone? Welcome to this edition of There Can Only Be One, the podcast that puts together the all-star best of playlists of your favorite bands and artists, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. When you take a look at 90s bands, not only was the music really damn good, but the band names were definitely something to behold, because you would hear them, you would sit there and go, there's no way that could be a real band name. And we've talked about one of those bands on this show before when we did a Spin Shuffle Skip episode on the one and only album by the Rainbow Butt Monkeys. Again, it's one of those fantastic names. And then, of course, you had like Big Head Todd and the Monsters and Ned's Atomic Dustbin.
Mott the Hopple comes to mind.
Well, that would be the 70s. That would definitely be the 70s. But the 90s had its fair share of awesome band names. And we're talking about one today. That is the one and only Hootie the Blowfish. And here to join me, Lyle Robichaud is back. Lyle, how you doing, man?
I am doing so great. I have wanted to do this episode for a while. I think I brought this up a long time ago. Underrated band, underappreciated band. I think it's a great name. I've been a fan for a long time of both Hootie and Mr. Rucker on his own solo country endeavors. As I am an East Coast boy, I'm big into the country music, but I truly believe that they're one of the most underappreciated bands of their era, with some of the best catalog that we've looked at so far for stuff that me and you have discussed. So I'm really excited for this one.
Oh yeah, and I'm just I wonder how many times he's had to sit there and say, no one in the band is named Hootie. I don't even know where the band name came from. Like, I
believe, from what I've been told, because I did look into this, as we all know, Hootie is a hoot is also another thing for a drag off of a certain devil's lettuce cigarette, and a blowfish is when you blow out. So I think it is a weed euphemism. From what I can gather, Darius said it does have something to do with smoking, but there's never been a full kind of breakdown of where the band name came from that I could find.
That squares, I think. That definitely squares.
It does track, that's for sure.
All right, so here's what we are going to do. We are about to go through 7 albums from the Hootie and the Blowfish discography. As always, we're not doing any live albums or best of compilations. We're also not going to be covering the Coochie Pop EP, because the majority of those songs were then re-recorded and released on major label albums, so we'd just be duplicating ourselves at that point. We're also not going to be covering Darius Rucker's solo stuff on this episode. This is just Hootie and just the Blowfish, not Darius Rucker's solo stuff. That will be another episode somewhere down the road. And we're going to start in 1994, which means that this album is 30 freaking years old this year.
You know what, Jason? We don't got to bring that up because I was born in 95, so we don't got to bring up the big 30 because I'm staring down the barrel of it and it scares me.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. I'm sure next year you'll be sitting there looking at some of those albums that turned 30 that year and go, I'm old. Yeah. I'm really old. I'm old.
I already feel old as we sit here. When somebody said to me the other day at work that SpongeBob was classic TV, that hit me. That hit me right in the stomach.
We're not even going to talk about Ren and Stimpy then. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The album was released on July 5th of 1994. The band at this point is Darius Rucker, Mark Bryan on guitar, Dean Felber on bass, and Jim Sonnenfeld on drums. The album peaked at number 1 in the US, New Zealand, and Canada. Strap in because it sold a few copies. It is double diamond in the US, sitting at 22 times platinum. It's also diamond in Canada, platinum in New Zealand, and double platinum in Australia. There were 5 singles off of this one. Only Wanna Be With You charted the highest in the US, hitting number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 2 on the mainstream rock charts. It also hit number 1 in Canada. Time also hit number 1 in Canada and on the US adult pop charts. At the 1995 MTV VMAs, Hold My Hand won for Best New Artist in a Video. They were also nominated for the Viewer's Choice Awards. For Hold My Hand, they lost to Waterfalls by TLC. Then, at the 1996 MTV VMAs, Only Wanna Be With You was nominated for Best Group Video. They lost to Big Me by the Foo Fighters. And at the 1996 Grammys, they won for Best New Artist, and Let Her Cry won for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals. Not bad for a debut album.
And everything they lost out to some pretty game competition for the time. Losing to Big Me for the Foo Fighters and losing out to TLC, like those are not artists that you're gonna, sniff at losing to either, because those are really big things too. They were coming out in a really banging time for music. There was so much great original stuff coming out at the same time as them. It's kind of how I think they got lost in the shuffle a little bit in history's eye, because of course they're not as big as the Foo Fighters are nowadays. But this was for the time, one of the highest selling debut albums in history for the time. I can't remember the exact numbers on it, but I was looking up charts, and when it came out in 1994, it was in the top 5 highest selling debut albums within its first year. That's saying quite a bit for a band that, plays the music that they play, which kind of, I guess, would be called alternative blues.
Well, the fact that it's popping on the adult pop charts, makes me feel even much older. But still, regardless of, it's one of the things where you take a look at, and on Wikipedia, there is a list of the highest selling albums in the US of all time. And it's up there. It is absolutely up there. The highest selling album in the US, by the way, is The Greatest Hits by the Eagles. But this is, like, for a debut album and to be on that list, that is fan-frickin-tastic.
Yep. I will wave this band's flag to the end of my days. This is still one that my friends sometimes give me flack for liking. Cracked Rear View is the vinyl I usually have sitting on the little stand behind my record player, just because I think it is a masterpiece.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny, too, because there was, as I was looking through some of the footnotes on the Wikipedia entry for this, and it's like, 22 times, platinum. And there's a little note, with a story about how Columbia House, taught us all to steal music. Not saying that any of us, maybe went into the Columbia House party, as it were, but I'm not saying. But I'm saying.
Oh, you're saying.
So off of Cracked Rear View, with an album with a fantastic track list, what did you go with?
This is so hard because it's cover to cover. This is one of those few albums where any pick could be my pick. But you have to go with their 2 best songs, which my number one with a bullet was Hold My Hand. Of course, Hold My Hand is just a classic song of the era and now. Everything you want out of every member of the band, including Darius's amazing voice, wonderfully at work. But my honorable mention, and the one I almost picked, was Let Her Cry. I think Let Her Cry should have been bigger than Hold My Hand. It is the one where he really flexes the kind of wail that he has. But I definitely had to go with Hold My Hand for this one.
See, I had Only Want to Be With You and Let Her Cry on my short list. And I'm probably going to get a little bit of flack for this one because I'm not going with one of the bigger singles off of this. But my pick off Cracked Rear View is Drowning.
Oh, wow.
This is one of those songs where it was released as a single, but it wasn't one of the big singles out there. But
I think it was the last one they released off of this album too, the final single before they moved on to the next project.
But it has a lot of the things that I look for in a song. The pre-chorus, fantastic. The guitar in this, the harmonies during the chorus. Like Darius Rucker is good, but when he's harmonizing with the rest of the band, it's even better. As I was listening to this album again, this song reminded me of a song called Pennadona's Hand from Lowest of the Low off of their Hallucigenia album. Hallucigenia was the album that actually got me into Lowest of the Low. And Pennadona's Hand is one of those fantastic songs where the acoustic guitar is really driving the boat on it. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that album, please do. And I'm sure somewhere down the road, a Lowest of the Low episode will happen. But Drowning reminded me a little bit of Pennadona's Hand. And the fact that song would probably be my one pick off of Lowest of the Low, it makes sense that Drowning is that pick for me.
It's a great song, but you really can't go wrong on this album. Like I said, you could have picked any of them and I would probably be with you on it, just because this is it's very rare that the debut album stays in such high regard after a while, but this one, it is just a perfect collection, sets it up amazingly for what's to come, and it doesn't really get any worse, but for a debut, incredible.
See, I couldn't pick Only Want to Be With You because I'm a Steelers fan and not a Dolphins fan.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Only Want to Be With You is, I think, one of the ones from their catalog that's got more legs, though, because there's been a lot of covers. of Only Want to Be With You. Most recently, Post Malone actually did a cover of Only Want to Be With You for the Detective Pikachu movie, if you can believe it.
That is a sentence I think I never thought I would put, have all those. Post Malone,
Covers Hootie and the Blowfish for Pokemon.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah. The things we actually end up going with on this show. I like it, though. I do like it.
I love it. I love Post, too.
There were some songs off the 25th anniversary release, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever thought about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, it's easy to get caught up in the daily grind, and sometimes we forget to make time for new experiences. Remember when we were kids and learning was part of everyday life? Now it feels like we're always in work mode. But what if we could tap into that curiosity again? Whether it's learning how to garden, picking up a new language, or finally beating your friend in your fantasy football league, there's so much out there to explore. Therapy can help you reconnect with that childlike sense of wonder. I know for me, therapy has been a great way to learn about myself, set healthy boundaries, and develop positive habits. It's not just for times of crisis. It's about growing and becoming the best version of yourself. I know I am more in tune with both my positive self, which I highlight, and my negative self, which I'm working to minimize since I began working with my BetterHelp therapist. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, BetterHelp is a great option. It's fully online, so it's convenient, and it fits around your schedule. You'll fill out a quick questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch at any time with no extra charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Pantheon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Pantheon.
But first, we need to go to Fairweather Johnson, released April 23rd, 1996. The album did hit number 1 on the Billboard 200 and is triple platinum in the US. There were 3 singles off of this one. Old Man and Me hit number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hit number 1 in Canada, which proves that Canada likes Hootie the Blowfish more. So off of this, their sophomore release, what did you go with?
See, their sophomore release is kind of one of their lesser known ones. It's got less hits that you immediately recognize when they start to play. There's a lot of Hootie songs that start as soon as they begin. A lot of people that aren't as familiar with them as I am are like, oh yeah, I know this one. This is one that does not have very many of those songs. But if you're a big fan like me, you've listened to it a lot. I went with Honey Screw off of this one. But my short list had Tootie. It was really hard not to pick Tootie, but I think Honey Screw is the more strong of all of them. I wish it would have charted a little bit better because I know they play that one a lot live and it goes over very well with a lot of kind of the more diehard fan base. So it's kind of the sleeper pick of all of them. But Honey Screw is my pick. My short list, however, does have Tootie on it.
I think you just wanted to pick Tootie from Hootie just to be able to say that sentence.
Okay, it sounds good, but the song is great as well. People can listen to it and they will agree with me.
There was something about the 90s too that bands tried to avoid, for lack of a better term, the sophomore slump. And it's kind of hard to take a look at any album that would come after Cracked Review and not be considered a sophomore slump because Cracked Review overachieved and over-succeeded on so many different levels. Like, no matter what Fairweather Johnson did in sales and in chart performance, it was always probably going to be looked at as a sophomore slump because Cracked Review was so big. And that doesn't take away from the songs that were on the disc at all.
No, it's true, but it's really difficult, especially when, like you said, it's the second album and you hit it out of the park on your first try. It's almost like, how are we going to top that? You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who, and I've heard this from a lot of different music experts in my field, if you come up with a really good album, a really good one, like they did with Cracked Rearview, it doesn't matter even if the album that comes after that is better in every way, people will still gravitate toward what brought you to the dance kind of thing. And unfortunately, I don't think Fairweather Johnson is as strong as Cracked Rearview. So they kind of were on the back foot, but it was because of their own success. So it's a very weird catch-22 to be in if you're a band, I think. We were so good the first try, we don't know if we can make a second attempt that was better.
And of course, a label's going to sit there and take a look at it and go, cool, you did great with Cracked Review. Do it again.
Yeah, exactly. They're expecting the roof to come off, right?
Yeah, which is probably why Old Man and Me is my pick off of this album.
Ooh.
Because because it was actually on the Coochie Pop EP. It was one of those songs that didn't get re-recorded for Cracked Review, but one of those songs that kind of got them the major label attention, so that makes sense. Tucker's Town was on my short list, but Old Man and Me, it almost jumped off this disc for me because it sounded like it would have belonged on Cracked Review.
Very soulful, very, like I said, they're at their best when they take advantage of Darius Rucker's church choir voice, which is what it is. He gets a lot of that power from his gospel roots and growing up where he grew up. I'm a huge fan of Darius. So they lend themselves the best when they lean into that. And that's one of those songs that really does.
Oh yeah. And it's one of those things where if you take a look at, their performance and their ability to add so much soul out of Darius Rucker's voice, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Living Color with Corey Glover, who has such a powerful voice that it actually transcends the genre that they're in.
And Darius is the same thing, because look at the success he's had in two very different genres, like Hootie and the Blowfish and his solo country stuff are two very, very different things. He even has a Christmas album that's fantastic. Like, the man can just sing on all levels.
Oh yeah, no, his voice is definitely a powerhouse out there. We now move on to Musical Chairs, released September 15th, 1998. It peaked at number 4 in the US and is platinum. There were 3 singles off of this one. I Will Wait hit number 3 on the US adult pop charts. Again, I feel old because I said the adult pop charts. Musical Chairs, I think it's a pickup from Fairweather as far as a collection of songs go. Your thoughts on the album?
I completely agree. I think they kind of hit their stride again, the sophomore slump, and then they really did pull up out of it a little bit for this one. It's not quite as cover to cover as Cracked River was, but this one was a very difficult one to pick as well. Off of Musical Chairs, my pick was Only Lonely, which is one of the very few slower tempo songs that I like. I'm not really a slow tempo music guy, but that one was just too good to not get into. And the hardest choice from an album that I had was this one, because my honorable mention is Las Vegas Nights, which I think is one of the best songs a band has ever recorded and not released as a single.
Ooh, that's a fascinating.
I absolutely love Las Vegas Nights. They could have put that long before Darius made his jump to country. They could have put that on country radio and people would have eaten it up, I think.
See, that feels like it's a My Weekly Mixtape episode. Songs that were never released as a single.
Oh, that is a good idea. Songs that should have been a single but weren't. That's a great idea.
Oh, now I have to call Brian. Now I have to let him know. For me, I did go with Only Lonely as well. And it all sits in the string section on this song. I am a sucker for strings. And, I come by it honestly, because when I was in high school, I went to the high school that I went to because of the string orchestra program. So, I play bass guitar in a cover band. I played okay. I am brimming with adequacy, to quote News Radio.
Don't let them be modest, everybody. They're great. If you're in Ontario and you see Only the Bridesmaid on the marquee, go see them.
But I learned on an upright bass playing classical and jazz, and that was how I ended up switching over to bass guitar. So anytime the strings are there and present, I am so in there. And again, the harmonies are there. I had Wishing, Home Again, and Desert Mountain Showdown on my short list.
Desert Mountain Showdown was one of the ones I definitely considered as well, for the exact same reason. Like, this album actually was much more, I don't want to say orchestral, but there was a lot more playing around with the string sections on this than there is going forward, because they very much dip back into like the bluesy rock after this. This is one of their more orchestral arrangements, I guess, when it comes to a set list.
Yeah, and I freaking love when bands bring in the strings. It just adds so much more, and it sounds so good on record or on vinyl or however you're listening to it. When you have, even if it's one of those like quote unquote keyboard string orchestras, it still adds that layer that just flushes out the song much more. I would love to see a Hootie and the Blowfish with an orchestra performance.
Well, don't get me excited, because I am going to see them live very, very soon. And I can't wait to hear these things live, because they do bring quite a big band. There's some extra instruments that come on for some songs, and it's missing nowadays. You don't get these kinds of bands that incorporate a ton of instruments and a ton of actual musical arrangements and aren't overproduced anymore, they can reach a level of power Hootie and the Blowfish can without the use of any digital technology. Bands today wish they could hit these kind of like the soul and the power that we're talking about. You just can't get that these days. You just don't see it very much anymore. Like the Zac Brown band comes to mind as a band that kind of has that same huge multi-piece songs, like several different rotating casts of musicians depending on the song. It's rare to see. It's rare to see nowadays.
Having seen Rush on their Clockwork Angels tour when they had a string section with them, it just adds that much more.
A couple of my favorite live albums are actually, of course, Kiss Alive when they are with, I think it's the Manchester City Orchestra, and Metallica, their S&M ones, where they go and get an orchestra too. It sounds amazing when you take any band and put an actual string orchestra behind them.
Oh, even recently, you take a look at Alter Bridge and their performance with a full-on orchestra.
I didn't even know Alter Bridge did it.
Oh, you need to check that out for sure.
I do have to check that out. I have to hear Edge's theme song with an orchestra accompaniment. That sounds amazing.
I don't think they did Metalingus on that one, but they had some fantastic songs and songs that they don't normally pull out live. But it's like, when we got the orchestra, we might as well try it.
Yeah, you got to play to the strengths, right? If you have the power, if you got the power behind you, you got to use it.
Scattered, Smothered, and Covered. Not a dinner order. It's their October 24th, 2000 release. An album full of covers and B-sides. Peaked at number 71 in the US. I Go Blind appeared earlier on the Friends soundtrack, and it peaked at number 2 on the US adult pop charts. So before we get into the songs on this album, and there are some fantastic covers on this album, for a band like Hootie and the Blowfish, who was really riding high and to be on the Friends soundtrack, and this is probably why we got a lot of attention for Hootie up here to cover 5440's I Go Blind. Like, that is arguably one of the biggest of the moment bands at the time covering a Canadian band song. I mean, that's huge up here.
It is. Anytime somebody goes into the catalog and finds a can rock band, I call them, one of those deep cut, only big in Canada bands, you know it's going to catch on like wildfire. And I think it's just because they know their music and they know that we produce some great stuff up here, even the stuff that doesn't penetrate south of the border and get into the, lovely 2-bedroom that exists below our loft up here. It just translates well, and this is one of the few covers that's better than the original.
I was going to say, like, this is probably up there with surpassing the original. And it's not like it did much different than 5440 did when they wrote it, but it definitely added more to it. And again, a lot of that is right up there with Darius Rucker's vocals. Like,
it is. It really is. I have some hot takes about the Hootie and the Blowfish. Every single song Hootie and the Blowfish covers, it's a 50-50 shot of it being better than the original, and we'll get to that later. We'll get to that later on. I'll explain what I mean by that.
Oh, I can imagine what we're going to be talking about. But off of this collection of covers, what did you go with?
I did not go with I Go Blind as my pick, actually. I went with Driver 8. Because, again, it's a bold claim, and it's me playing favorites, but I do think this is better than REM's version of the song. I think that Darius lends his voice to Driver 8 fantastically, and obviously I Go Blind was the very close second. But being a huge REM fan as well, getting to hear a song that I already loved from a band that I already really like, covered by a band that I absolutely love and doing it better, I couldn't not pick Driver 8.
See, I could not, in all good conscience, pick Driver 8. And I say that because there is an album out there with a cover of Driver 8 that does it better. Better than REM, better than Hootie and the Blowfish.
Who did it? Who did this?
Ken Tizard, off of his All Together Now album. Ken Tizard is actually the bassist of The Watchmen.
Oh, wow.
And during the pandemic, he put out an album of all covers, and Driver 8 is on there. And I got a chance to talk to Ken on my old Made You a Mixtape podcast. We talked about that album and some of the covers that he did. It is a fan-freaking-tastic version of Driver 8 and probably the best song on that album. So if you have a chance, go check out Ken Tizzard's All Together Now album. Give it a stream. Purchase it if you can. Fantastic. And Driver 8 is, because as I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh yeah, Driver 8's on this album. I'll probably like this. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, but I like the Ken Tizzard version better.
I'm going to have to listen to it now because those are some bold words. I thought I had some bold words, but that's even bolder.
Hey, I call it like I see it, and Ken Tizzard did a fantastic version of that.
And I trust your musical opinion, so I'm going to have to go listen to it.
I also did not pick I Go Blind because, again, it's one of those songs where you take a look at 5440's discography, and when the day comes when we end up doing a 5440 episode, I Go Blind is definitely not going to be my only one song. I will tell you that right now. I don't even know if it'll be the song off that album for me.
Wow.
It's not that it's a bad song. I just like other 5440 songs better. I had Almost Home and I Go Blind on my short list, but for me, it's right off the bat, Fine Line.
Oh wow, the Randy Foster one.
Yeah. And aside from Hootie and the Blowfish just killing it, Gina Rankin, who does harmony vocals on this and Almost Home, her vocal pairing with Darius Rucker just adds so much to this. Like, don't get me wrong, the rest of the guys in the band, when they harmonize with Darius, it sounds great. Gina Rankin added so much more to it. I would love to see, and again, this is just me trying to manifest things out there into the universe, and hopefully one day they'll happen. And, Darius, if you're listening to this, because clearly you love this show, if you're thinking about it, a duets album.
Oh, he would be. There's not every artist I could say could pull that off, honestly. But having seen Darius live, Darius, not Hootie, he did a couple of arrangements with the other artists that were performing at the Cavendish Beach Music Festival one time when I saw him. And he did a couple of songs with Madeline Merlot from Hootie's collection, and she harmonized with them, and it was fantastic. I am all in for a Hootie duet album, and get some fun stuff in there. Like let's hear Hootie get up there with people like Ellie King, who also does the kind of like bluesy rock style that he likes to do, and get some country people in there. Get Dolly Parton involved or something. I would be there. I would be 100% in.
Oh, if you put Darius Rucker together with, maybe a Carrie Underwood.
Oh, yes.
That would be good.
Yeah.
And there are some other artists out there, like a Dorothy would be fan-freaking-tastic.
It's a big ask, but Adele.
I'm sure Darius Rucker can make things happen.
Yeah, I'm sure he could. But Adele's in the stratosphere right now, but I think her and him together would be something magical. One of the few albums that would probably be all ballads and slow stuff that I would go and purchase day one.
I guess it depends too on who he brought in. Like if he brought in something like a Miley Cyrus, I'm sure they would probably find something that would be very good.
That'd be a good match. That's a good match actually, because she, for all of the Disney stuff and for all of the the Robin Thicke era, I do think Miley is an absolutely fantastic artist. I think she's reinvented herself several times. I'm a fan of hers. So.
Oh yeah, no, and whenever she does get up there and start to do duets and whatnot with other artists, it's
Girls Got Pipes.
Yeah,
her version of Jolene is excellent.
Give that girl her flowers. She has earned every single one of them. Hootie and the Blowfish's self-titled album, released March 4th, 2003. The album peaked at number 46 in the U.S. There were two singles off of this one. Innocence hit number 24 on the U.S. adult pop charts. Another actually really good collection of songs off of this album.
Really good, and much more back to the cracked rearview roots. The blues rock is in full swing, very soulful, a lot more electric guitar, and a bit of a louder volume to it, for sure. It was a return to form, and I think they knew it. That's why they made it the self-titled album. That's
the thing too. When a band mid-career puts out an album and it's their self-titled, it's almost like them saying, let's just remind everyone who we are, and
back to basics.
Yeah, and there are some bands that have actually done some of their best work mid-career with a self-titled disc. Evanescence. I know people are going to sit there and say Fallen is the best Evanescence album of all time, and I wouldn't fault them for saying that. But their self-titled third album, if you have not listened to that album, you're missing some of the heaviest Evanescence stuff that's out there.
I didn't know that they even had a self-titled album, to be quite honest. That came out halfway through their career.
Oh yeah, no, you need to check that album out because it is something. But off of the self-titled album, what did you go with?
This one was a difficult one because this is the style of Hootie that I really like. I like them best when they're kind of louder, much more focused on the rock side of the bluesy rock. So the best I think was Little Brother off of this album. But I went with an honorable mention, which is really close. Show Me Your Heart. Show Me Your Heart is an incredible song, but I think Little Brother really does carry this as like kind of the punch single.
Yeah, I had Show Me Your Heart and Little Brother on my short list, as well as Space. And Little Brother, that's got a funk little vibe to it.
It does. It's great. It really does. It leans in. Like I said, they're at their best when they lean into their style, and that is 100% the most Hootie and the Blowfish song on the album. That is self-titled Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah, and not a surprise too to hear that kind of funk groove to it, considering that the album was produced by Don Was. So that makes absolute total sense. But for me, I ended up going with Innocence. This was one of those literally stop what you're doing moments while listening to the album. And I'll admit, like I had been known to skip a song or two here and there in preparing for shows. Innocence, it was like, okay, I had Little Brother, I had it written down, it's all good. Then Innocence starts and, slower with the strings and all the things that I like in a song. And it's like, this was literally just stop everything that I was doing and just soak it in. And that doesn't always happen for me. The last time I remember it really happening was with Candlebox's Disappearing in Airports and Alive at Last. It's literally one of those, you hear it and you don't realize you haven't moved for the 4 or 5 minutes that the song lasts. Innocence has that sit your ass down and just unplug for 3 minutes and 24 seconds because you're going to need to.
And you just love that feeling, don't you? It's the best, especially when you find new music that's like that. Maybe a band that you've heard of, but you hadn't listened to a lot of the stuff. I have converted so many of my friends to Hootie and the Blowfish by doing just that. Putting on whether it's before the bar or before like we're going somewhere or when I'm cooking. Cracked Rear View is my breakfast cooking vinyl album. And I've had several people over at my place. I've started to play it, and about 2 or 3 songs in, they saw, who is this? Like they're looking like, what is this music? And when I tell them who it is, they have that same kind of feeling. Like I had to stop and like pay attention. There's a difference between listening and really listening. Like listening offhand and then sitting there and, like you said, kind of stopping for 3 or 4 minutes and going, I want to like hear every bit of this with my ears. And I love the fact that it did that for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I maybe a hot take, but I think Innocence is probably their best slow song. Better than Let Her Cry, better than Only Lonely.
Ooh. Yeah, wow, better than Only Lonely. It's there. It's up, but better than Only Lonely that's a tough call.
Like I said, might be a hot take, but it's my hot take and I stand by it. Looking for Lucky, released August 9th, 2005. The album hit number 47 on the Billboard 200 and actually hit number 4 on the US indie charts. There were 2 singles off of this one. One Love hit number 5 on the US AC charts. So off of Looking for Lucky, what did you go with?
Looking for Lucky is an interesting album because it's often the one, even amongst the fans of the band, that's usually kind of forgotten. It's kind of in the same pile as Musical Chairs a little bit, where it gets swept away a little bit because it doesn't have as many of the big chart toppers that everybody can instantly recognize. But I think it's an absolutely great album. And my best was Hey Sister Pretty, which it's one of my favorite Hootie songs in general is Hey Sister Pretty, with my honorable mention being The Killing Stone, which I think is a good kind of, it's a bit different. It's a little bit different than their other stuff, but a great album that did kind of get lost in the shuffle a little bit. And they did go away for a while after this one too. So they did go out on a bit of a commercial whimper, but I think musically this is one of their better ones that's kind of forgotten about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you cannot judge an album from sales, especially post Napster, post LimeWire, and into the Spotify and iTunes era. You cannot judge an album by how few times platinum or even gold it may be, because that's not how music is consumed in the year of our podcast 2024. That's just the simple fact of the matter. And this is why I love doing this show and producing it, because it forces people to go in and rediscover albums later on in into the discography.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's even the art nowadays of listening to a complete album, I think, has almost gone by the wayside because of how easy it is to just, okay, this is the popular one, bing, it's on the playlist. I'm never looking at the rest of this ever again. There's a lot that's lost in this generation of how to consume media, but I definitely think that you cannot judge how good an album is by commercial sales. Look how many albums went on to be cult favorites later on down the line, decades after they came out, and all of a sudden like a whole new generation picked up on it and took the ball and ran. Some great albums were completely lost when they first came out, but then it took the grandkids of the people who were supposed to be listening to it when it was the target audience to actually pick it up and make it a success.
Oh, absolutely. And dear listeners, if you want to hear the songs that we are talking about, just go to our website at notthatbadcast.com and go to the episode page for this episode that you are listening to, unless you're listening to us on the website already and then you're already here. But at the bottom of this episode page, you will find the Spotify playlist of the songs that we have both picked from each of the albums. So please do go listen to the songs and then let us know in the comments below what songs would have made your list. You mentioned Hey Sister Pretty and The Killing Stone, so you basically just rifled off my short list. But this was, for me, right off the gun, State Your Piece. Such a strumming good time, and with a really big radio chorus on this song. Like, this song felt like it should have been released to singles.
Big hooks, big hooks, big hooks. Now, when it wasn't on I think it's because I've heard that one so much that it didn't make it on my short list because it's on my playlist. But it's true. Like I said, this is the album by them that I look at, and every time I talk about the band, I also have Looking for Lucky on vinyl. I don't have the self-titled, and I don't have Scattered, Smothered, and Covered on vinyl. I have Looking for Lucky, and I have Cracked Rear View. So people always are like, I don't even know what this album is. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand it because there is so much super radio-friendly stuff on that one.
The problem is, and if you don't mind me ranting for a little bit, because I'm gonna get on my soapbox here and do a little bit of a rant. The problem with terrestrial radio and even satellite radio, because they're guilty of it too, is they'll only ever play the big songs. Yes, I will give Sirius some credit in that there are deep tracks channels, but you find that they kind of sit in the same pocket of the same artists on every channel all the time. Like, I've lost track of the number of times I have flipped from one channel playing Rage Against the Machine to another channel playing Rage Against the Machine to another channel, and Tom Morello was hosting the show, and I'm sure he's going to go play Rage Against the Machine. It's kind of what happens, or Audio Slave, one of the two. Dear listeners and dear radio stations, get the other albums. The number of times that the big song from an artist is not their best song, I've lost count.
It's staggering. It's staggering how often that's true.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I love the fact that there are artist-led channels on Sirius, but they are few and far between in a very small, like, you have to be something special to kind of have a takeover of a station. You know, you got your Red Hot Chili Peppers station, you got your Bon Jovi station, you got your Tom Petty station and Bob Marley and Pearl Jam, and that's all well and good. But maybe try out a few other bands. I would love to see what Hootie and the Blowfish would put on their specialty channel.
Yes, because, and like you said, when you get your own channel, you would think that would give the artist a platform of saying, okay, I know so much stuff that hasn't gotten the shake that it deserved. Let's put that in the spotlight. And I love the Tom Petty channel. Like, I listen to the Tom Petty satellite channel a lot. I'm a huge Tom Petty guy, but I find myself oftentimes thinking the same thing for something that's supposed to be dedicated to showing a spotlight. It shows the spotlight on the same things that are already there.
Yeah.
And you're right. These, not even just the smaller artists, obviously give Darius Rucker the world, give him a station, give him a label, give him everything. But in my mind, there should be, when a deep cut station is there, I want deep cuts. I want to hear stuff I don't even know what I'm listening to. You know what I mean? Like, I want to have to take the Shazam out if I don't hear the radio DJ and find out, oh my God, this is by this artist that I've heard 100 times. What album is this off of? Discover things for me. Show us things that we're not used to. And it's almost like a lost art nowadays. There's so much stuff, I feel like, Hootie included, that now it's just like a one-trick pony. When people hear their name, they know the 3 songs and that's it. But it goes so much deeper than that for so many artists that are considered one-hit wonders. if you went and listened and gave 10 minutes to go through their second or third album where the hits aren't there, you're going to find something incredible that, like you said, is probably their best song.
Yeah. I would love for a station to basically take an hour at a time and dedicate it to an artist and basically have it be like, what Much Music Spotlight used to be, where they would just play that artist for the hour, but they would do it chronologically through the career. So you could hear the evolution of the band, one or two songs per album, depending on how many albums there are. This might be a much longer than, 1 hour episode of a show. I'm sure, you get to Kiss and it's like, yeah, we're going to need an extra hour here.
Yeah.
But
we found that out.
Yes, we did. But for 7 albums, that's only 7 songs. Throw in some interview clips, and you have a good solid hour of programming. And Hootie the Blowfish fans are going to be over the moon.
Especially for bands like this that, like I said, just simply do not get the spotlight they deserve. They will come running. If you build it, they will come. But not even just for them. There's so many bands that are in their same kind of situation. It's scary. There's so much quality out there that just is kind of lost today.
Oh, absolutely. Not that I'm trying to print Sirius XM some money here, but, if you're making that station, I'm available.
Yeah, and you're already doing the Lord's work with this anyway.
So. Right? We're halfway there. We're halfway there.
We are already helping the masses.
Exactly. 14 years later, we had the release of Imperfect Circle, released November 1st, 2019. The album hit number 3 on the U.S. Top Country Album charts and number 26 on the Billboard 200. There were 2 singles off of this one, Hold On and Miss California, neither of which charted. Again, it took a while to get to this point. Of course, you had Darius Rucker's solo career, and that's okay and well and good. But then you get Hootie back, and there are a ton of guests on this album.
There is, and time for another hot take. This is their best album since Cracked Rear View. Their latest album is the best album musically since Cracked Rear View. I was feral for this when it came out in 2019, because as a longtime fan from when I was a kid, I had kind of resigned myself to the fact that Looking for Lucky was probably it, and that it was going to be just Darius's country stuff from this point forward, which I was fine with. When they announced this was happening, I was over the moon, but I was also kind of in the back of my head going, there's a 50-50 shot, highest of hopes, lowest of expectations when this was announced. And man, did it blow my socks off when it came out. Right from New Year's Day all the way down to half a day ahead. I think this is all quality. I love this album.
I mean, just to give you an idea of what you're walking into with this album, you have Ed Sheeran in here. You got Chris Stapleton. You have Sheryl Crow doing a lot of backup vocals on this album.
Yep.
Like there are a lot of people came out to play for this one.
Yeah, he dug into his country address book a little bit and definitely pulled out some gems. Anytime you get Chris Stapleton in a music studio, you know something beautiful is going to happen, and this is no exception.
And the fact that we haven't had to say there was a member change. No, it's been the same 4 guys, and that's really, really awesome to see. It just means that they clearly get along and they make fantastic music together. But off of Imperfect Circle, what did you go with?
And this is where it's weird, because even though I think it is the best thing they've done since their debut album, the best song on this is a cover. Because the best song on this album is their cover of Losing My Religion. And let me tell you why. That is, in my humble opinion, for what it's worth, I've been on the show a lot, so I've got some knowledge of music. That is probably the best cover I've ever heard. Yeah. And I know some people will disagree, but personally for me, the Losing My Religion was one of my favorite songs growing up. Still is in probably my top 10. Love REM, and I love everything about it. I think it's one of those songs that is just lightning in a bottle. The writing, the arrangements, everything is perfect. So to hear one of my favorite songs covered by one of my favorite bands and done so beautifully, it absolutely, I remember my Spotify Wrapped. That was my number 1 most played song for the year. Probably still is on there this year because I listen to it very often. It's got to be it. It just has to be what it is. See,
maybe it's just me, but that cover did nothing for me.
That's okay.
That's absolutely.
That's why everybody gets their opinion.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I'm actually in the process of learning this song and performing it with my other band. And, it's a great song. Don't get me wrong. It's a fantastic song. And maybe it's one of those things where sometimes when you learn a song to play live yourself, you discover more about it, or sometimes it's just like, okay, I'm good with that now. We're done.
You hear too much, maybe.
That's quite possible. It's quite possible, because there were some fantastic originals off of this one. Wildfire Love, and this is not my pick, but I need to talk about Wildfire Love here. And I talked about on Scattered, Smothered, and Covered when Gina Rankin added her vocals to Fine Line. Lucy Silvis on Wildfire Love. This is a fantastic duet off of this album, and she really brought it and blended really well with Darius Rucker. I also had Y on my short list, but for my pick, I'm going with Miss California. The album does, as a whole, it cruises at a nice, relaxed pace. This, to me, this song is that top-down California drive on the coast kind of feel.
Absolutely. And you really can't go wrong. There's no song you could pick on this one, much like Cracked Rearview, where I would judge you for it. But it's true. They really did go for encapsulating kind of every song on this has a very different feel too. Like you listen to Miss California and then you listen to Not Tonight, two very different hemispheres of music. But Miss California, great. It was on my short list for sure. But this was the only album where I had my pick picked before the episode was recorded.
All right, well, now it's come time, because we're at the end of our 7-album run here. So, Lyle, knowing how much you like this band and knowing how much you like these songs, this is going to be probably the hardest part for you. So, you know the drill. Please remind our listeners what songs you went with, and from the songs that you picked, if there can only be one Hootie and the Blowfish song, which one's it going to be?
So, for Cracked Rearview, I went with Hold My Hand. Fairweather Johnson, I went with Honey Screw. Musical Chairs, I went with Only Lonely. Scattered, Smothered, and Covered was Driver 8. Hootie and the Blowfish was Hootie and the Blowfish was Little Brother. Looking for Lucky, Hey Sister Pretty, and for Imperfect Circle, it was Losing My Religion. This is by far the hardest. There can only be one that we have done with me in the chair with you for sure. And while it may seem kind of like stereotypical, it has got to be Hold My Hand from Cracked Rearview. Because if there's only one thing you're going to listen to from Hootie and the Blowfish, you have to go with what brought them to the dance, and that is what is pretty well and very close to being a perfect album in their debut. And Hold My Hand is still a classic to this day. It's still getting played on alt rock stations. It's still getting played on some country stations. It's genre hopping. It's full of the soul. It's leaning into what makes them perfect. It's got to be Hold My Hand.
All right, and for me, off of Cracked Rearview, I went with Drowning. From Fairweather Johnson, I went with Old Man and Me. From Musical Chairs, I went with Only Lonely. Off of Scattered, Smothered, and Covered, I went with Fine Line. From the self-titled album, I went with Innocence. From Looking for Lucky, I went with State Your Peace. And from Imperfect Circle, I went with Miss California. And this is tough. This is not easy.
I told you this was going to be a good episode. I told you there's good music here. Way more than people realize.
And I will say that it right now sits between Drowning and Innocence. And I think it basically, depends on the mood of the day. And my pick will probably change tomorrow. And I'll have to sit there and go, do I re-record? No, I'm not going to re-record. So I am going to go with Drowning, because the song is fantastic. The album is fantastic. It's hard not to pick anything off that debut album, but here we are, and Drowning is my pick. Lyle, thank you so much for this. Now, please let our listeners know where they can find you out there on the interwebs and on the airwaves.
I am on the Let's Talk with Danny Stover show on AM 640 Toronto, but the easiest way to find us is the Radio Player Canada app. Stay tuned. There's a podcast coming out real soon with me and Danny that's much less news related, and it's going to be a little bit more kind of us riffing on stuff, much less hard newsy. So look us up. Definitely check out Let's Talk with Danny Stover as of right now, and keep your eyes out for our podcast.
All right, dude. Cannot wait until you bring the next artist to this show. And dear listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is an artist you want us to cover on There Can Only Be One, or an album that you want us to cover on Spin Shuffle Skip, hit us up on social media at OnlyOneCast, or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out all of our other shows. Until next time, he's Lyle, I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is There Can Only Be One on the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.